Are we going to get this thing started? Are we going to do this? Yeah, we're going to do it. You know why we're going to do it? Because
This won't hurt a bit.
About 45 seconds later is the most horrible scream that I've ever heard. A guy screaming. Not really saying anything, just this blood-curdling scream. Maybe there was an oh my God in there, and I've never heard anything. Just like, you talk about piercing the night, and then you automatically realize, oh shit.
Yeah.
Something horrible has happened. Somebody's hurt. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to our new show. This won't hurt a bit. What you heard was an outtake from one of this episode's stories. There'll be more coming up soon. My name's Mel Herbert, and I'll be one of your hosts. I'm an ER doc, work in the emergency department, have for about 25 years, on 2 continents, on the front line, seeing the sick, seeing the injured, seeing the worst that people can do, and seeing the best that they can do. But I've taken a little time off to produce this show. But more on this later. You see, it's really hard to do episode 1. Starting with an explanation of the show rather than actually just doing the show always comes off a little lame, I think. A little flat, a little uninteresting. But I think we have to do it. But let's do it fast. This show is the product of a group of docs and artists and audio professionals that produce medicine's largest and most popular education podcast. That podcast's called EM Rap. It keeps those docs and nurses working on the front line of emergency medicine up to date. It reminds them all the things they need to know when they're looking after all kinds of emergencies, from heart attacks to fevers in little kids to how to take out that toy train from that special place you put it. It's a show full of education and science, but we also pack it with humour and history and music. It's a real-life edutainment variety show. The subscribers, they really love it. It's grown enormously over the last 15 years. And those same docs and nurses that listen to the show, that get their education from that show, said you should do another one just like it, but for the non-medical crowd. Aim it at smart people, not trained in medicine, but interested in all that is good and bad and ugly about the human body, about the human psyche, and about medical history. And so here it is. Stories and discussions to inform you, to inspire you, and entertain you. Your other host will be Jess. She's an ER doc in training, and we're going to hear more from Jess in just a minute. But first, I want to tell you about a big crash. This story first appeared on our medical show, but we've reworked it for you here. There's lots of drama, there's lots of tension, and there's even lessons to be learned. There's some medical terms. I'll jump in every now and then, as little as possible, just to tell you what those are, but to try and not break the flow of the story. So the other voice you're going to hear is Aaron Bright, another ER doc. We're talking about this story from our perspective of working in the emergency department, of seeing patients come in, of paramedics bringing us sick people. So ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, for the first time for the public, the big crash.
Mel Herbert,
Yes.
turns out you told me the craziest story I've ever heard in my freaking life. We're talking about yesterday morning.
Barely 24 hours ago, young man.
I'm not even going to set it up, so tell me the story.
Okay, so we'd gone to Homeboy's annual dinner.
Homeboy Industries.
Homeboy Industries, which is one of the charities that we are involved with, and it was a great night. And
Great night.
Lives changed, and gangbangers going to jail and then coming out and getting jobs through Homeboy, and we're just having a great night. It was a wonderful time.
Look up Homeboy Industries on the internet. It's quite a cool place.
It's very cool, and you should help support them. So then I'm minding my own business when all of a sudden I'm asleep. I sleep in my bed, 3 a.m.
Yeah.
The window's open, warm night in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
We hear this giant crash. And both my wife and I woke up. And initially, I didn't think too much of it, although it was bigger than usual. Outside our house is a bit of a dip, so when big trucks go over it, they'll often go clunk, clunk, smash. But this one was clearly very loud, and I thought, boy, that sounds like somebody lost their glass load or something that fell off the truck.
Right.
Whatever, so I roll over. About 45 seconds later is the most horrible scream that I've ever heard. A guy screaming. Not really saying anything, just this blood-curdling scream. Maybe there was an oh my God in there, and I've never heard anything. Just like, you talk about piercing the night, and then you automatically realize, oh shit.
Yeah.
Something horrible has happened. Somebody's hurt. I get up and throw my jeans on and my shoes, and my wife immediately comes behind me. She's a nurse practitioner. She picks up the phone and starts dialing 911, and then I run up the street. So I'm running down the street, and about 4 houses up, I enter the scene, this surrealistic scene. There's a car upside down.
Yeah.
There's a wheel in the middle of the road, just torn off this car. It's a BMW, flipped upside down and crushed, absolutely crushed.
The car's in the middle of the road.
Middle of the road. So then as I get closer, I see that there's a girl sort of half in, half out of the car. There's a guy on top of her trying to do some form of CPR.
This is the screamer.
This is the screaming guy,
Okay.
I find out in about 5 seconds.
Yeah.
So he's pumping on her chest and blowing into her mouth, but she's still got some movement. She's still alive. So step number 1 is I have to pull him off. I'm like, dude, stand back. I'm a doctor. Let me check her out. So then he steps back, and then I see this girl. So the quick assessment is there's a lot of blood. She's spontaneously breathing.
Okay.
No spontaneous eye movement, moving her arms a little bit. She's probably got her left hip is dislocated, and her chest looks like it's flail.
Ooh, how young, old?
Young, so in her 20s.
Okay.
So a flail chest is when you have multiple ribs that are broken and the chest wall is moving the wrong way. Usually when you take a breath in, your chest wall rises. When you've got lots of broken ribs, particularly on one side, that chest wall starts to collapse. It's a sign of a really serious chest injury. And she's got the horrible gurgling respirations at 45.
And he's been doing CPR
He's been
on her
doing-
potentially flail chest.
Yeah, nightmare. So then when I get him back and then I start to sort of go, well, what am I going to do? So I start to just give her a jaw thrust, and then she's got an airway and she's breathing. A jaw thrust is a simple procedure where we put our hands behind the angle of the jaw and just push it forward a little bit. People that are deeply unconscious often can't control their airway. They don't have any muscle tone. So we just lightly push it forward. It brings the tongue off the back of the throat and people can breathe a little better.
Okay.
So he's screaming, oh my God, I think I killed her. We had a fight. I was drinking. I flipped the car. I killed my girlfriend. My life is over. Running around screaming bad time. Other people there, most of whom are screaming and being not very useful. Some are calling 911. Thankfully, my wife gets there. She assesses the situation and grabs that guy and starts talking him down because he's about to run away. He's like, I'm out of here. My life is over. I'm going to get a DUI. My life is over. I got to run. She's like, don't run. They're going to find you anyway. Stay here. Look after your girlfriend. Chill out. So then I sort of continue to assess her, giving her a jaw thrust and then feeling the back of her head, which is squished. You can feel she's got a depressed skull fracture. She's not bleeding a lot, but she's bleeding, reasonably briskly.
And she is clearly unconscious.
She is unconscious. Yeah. She's got few spontaneous arm movements.
Okay.
Not talking. She opens her eyes every now and then.
Do you have light at this point? Is it light out there?
No, not really. Some person had a flashlight, so every now and then when I can get his attention, we get the flashlight on. And I know that 911's coming because my wife's called. Then I realized, I've made about 17 mistakes already.
Yeah.
You've gone straight to the injured person. We haven't sort of cordoned off the scene to make sure it's safe, although there were some cars there and you're thinking nobody's going to come flying through, but didn't even think about that for a second. Went straight to the person on the ground.
Yeah.
And then I realized, hang on, there's a car upside down here.
Yeah.
Dude with flashlight. Is there anybody else in the car?
Oh my gosh, yeah.
So the driver dude says, no, it was just me and my girlfriend, just the two of us. But still, I get the guy with the flashlight. Just look anyway. God knows what the hell's going on here.
Yeah, who knows what that guy's doing.
So he looks in there and there's nobody in there. And then you realize there's gas pouring out of the car.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we know. Yeah, go ahead.
Then again, I'm just holding her airway and sort of trying to do some sort of an assessment. And the realizations, sort of the revelations start hitting you. And they come fast, furious. First of all, this is like a zombie apocalypse. What the hell have we walked up onto here?
Right.
The first big revelation you have is that there's crap all I can do for this person.
Right.
You've got 25 years of ER experience. You've worked in Resuscit County. You've seen the worst possible things. And you realize there's nothing you can do. Without equipment, without trained nurses, and without a hospital,
right.
All I can do is basically do a jaw thrust and C-spine maneuvers in this lady.
We're almost undertrained for this stuff. We're in the scene. There's no gurney.
They're
not strapped down.
There's nothing
You're
there.
not pissed that there's no IV.
It's crazy. So that's revelation number 1. Revelation number 2, having had that revelation, was, where the hell's the ambulance?
Yeah.
Help! Where are you guys?
Yeah.
And so what seems like an eternity, then as you're just sitting there, and I'm like, she has got a very good chance of going apneic. Apneic is when a person just stops breathing. It can happen for lots of reasons, but in a serious head injury, it's because your brain just stops. Then I'm completely screwed. What am I going to do?
Yeah.
I do a little CPR, a little airway maneuver. I can't tube her. I got nothing.
Wow.
Nothing to help her with.
Scary.
So I'm just standing there and trying to talk to her, not sure that she can hear anything, of course. Then I sort of, as I'm further into it, realizing, shoot, who else is around? What's going on? But mostly going, ambulance, please come. Ambulance, please come. Usually when you see the paramedics come, it's work. Oh, you're bringing us more work.
Right. And now you're like,
and now I'm
"Please
like, now I get it. Could you guys hurry? So they arrive. I've been in these situations. This is my worst, but I've, looked after MI patients in the street and stuff. There's usually two things that happen. One is that they just push you the hell out of the way.
Yep.
And the other one is they actually, spend a little time finding out who you are. So as they come up, one of the paramedics asks what's going on. So I sort of give them a GCS score and a quick overview of the scene. And I'm doing a dural thrust here, a respirations of 45. She's got a 3D pulse. She's clearly got a flail chest,
Right.
left hip dislocation, and a big time head injury.
Yeah.
And that sort of takes him back and goes, who are you? And I'm like, I'm an ER doc. Let's get her out of here fast.
Sure,
We
right.
need to get her to a trauma center. He was very good and understood. And then the captain comes up and says, who's that guy? And he goes, oh, he's a doc. And he goes, all right, take over from him. And then they do their stuff and they do it very well, very
Right.
fast. They get her on a
Package her up.
gurney. They package her up. I'm standing around because I think she could lose her airway. And if she does, I'm not sure they're going to be able to get it. I might have to cric her, but they're like, okay, doc, you've done enough. Step aside. They didn't say anything, but they're like looking at me. Back off, big fella, back off. We've got it. And I wanted them to have, like, go. Because the last thing I want to do is get between them and a trauma center. Don't screw around at the scene. Go. So they package her up pretty quickly. It always seems like eternity, though, when you're standing and you're like, go.
Right.
But they do it pretty quick, and they take her off. Off she goes. And then I stand around for a little while and talk to a few people who are freaking out. And boyfriend, perpetrator, as it were, is
Does the
now
cops
come
ever
down.
come?
The cops arrive at around the same time. And this is sort of a classic, and for those of you outside the United States, or at least outside large metropolitan areas in the United States,
Right.
because of the system we have here, you don't just get an ambulance. You often will get the firefighters. So they'll
And
come in the big
rig.
rigs,
Yeah,
big rig.
The whole firefighting rig.
But in classic sort of US fashion, you don't get one. By the
Yeah.
time I looked up, and I've got blood and crap all over me, by the time I look up, there are 6 of these giant rigs,
Oh, wow.
paramedics everywhere,
Yeah.
and about 5 cop cars.
Wow.
And they're sort of cordoning off the scene and doing what they do.
Right.
And the guy is sort of sitting now on the ground, just like continuing to freak out. Clearly sort of jacked up on some substances.
Right.
And also jacked up on a little thing called epinephrine.
Yes.
So then you realize there's nothing else to do.
Yeah.
Talk to a few of the people, and they drive off, and I've got blood all over me, and my wife and I look at each other, and I'm like, I guess it's time to go home for a shower. So go home and hit the shower, hop into bed, and amazingly enough, I'm asleep in like 20 minutes.
Yeah.
But
Oh,
I
really?
have the most disturbing dreams. In fact, the next morning I wake up, I'm like, although I clearly knew that what just happened and we were talking about it, the dreams that came after it was really confusing. My dreams, and it's hard to remember exactly because you know how they go away, but I was
Right.
something about, I was in the ER and there was a crash in the emergency department and I couldn't get one of the nurses from under the car. It was a really bizarre...
Somebody fell off their unicorn. And then you know you're dreaming.
That's a total dream. So the next morning, I'll just tell you the follow-up. So the next morning, my wife and I wake up and have breakfast and we go and assess the scene. And just as we get up there, they're piling the car onto the big truck. There's still that wheel, the surrealistic ripped-off wheel in the middle of the road, and some guy comes and picks that up and throws it on the back of the truck.
Wow.
And they're cleaning up all the gas. And then we see what happened, which was, 1 or 2 houses further down, there's a very short brick fence. And the car had clearly come around the corner and hit this brick fence and gone up on one wheel and run right across the top of the fence and then flipped upside down into the middle of the road.
Wow.
And we actually talked to the person who owned that fence, and it turns out as this thing hit, it fired these chunks of rock through her window.
Wow.
Multiple chunks of rock through the window into her 2 cars at the front of the house. They didn't know what was going on. They thought somebody was breaking into their house.
Sure, yeah.
So they called 911 and like, somebody's breaking in and it's bad and they're screaming. And at first they didn't believe them. Then they started getting more 911 calls.
Wow.
But crazy. Like she said, if it wasn't 3 a.m., if it was the middle of the afternoon, that's where they sit and have dinner and lunch. and there is just this boulder that came through the window and could have killed somebody. And I don't know these neighbours. We're in a neighbourhood where there's not good footpaths and stuff.
Yeah.
And it's not set up to know your neighbours. So this is just a neighbour like 5 houses down.
Right.
Never met her
before.
No, now.
Yeah.
Very nice lady.
Now it's good. You can talk about your favorite story.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of things to think about in that sort of environment. It's crazy that the Mel Herbert has somebody go upside down in front of his house. That is kind of weird to me. It brings up a lot of different things. Number one, the scene, right? The scene's crazy. We are not used to seeing the scene.
No.
We're used to seeing paramedics and a really mangled, bloody person, but it's pretty contained. All of your trauma and misery is basically contained in a 3-foot by 6-foot gurney, and you never really even think about the scene, and not only just how mangled the car is, but how crazy everybody is.
Right. And that it was a real learning lesson. You know, as a resident and stuff, you do your EMS runs and stuff. But if you don't have a particularly bad week or 2 weeks, you don't see this.
Right.
And sometimes the paramedics will bring in a picture of a car that's squished or whatever, and you go, wow, that must have been bad. And I have lots of friends that are on the outside that are paramedics, and I always say to them, look, you have it much worse than us. You come around the corner, you don't know what you're going to get.
Right.
But this was the first time I realized it really does take training to not make all the mistakes I made. So I called my buddy Kevin McCressa. Kevin is a firefighter, paramedic, 25 years experience here in Los Angeles, in some of the most difficult places to work at in this giant city. I had a lot of questions for Kevin, and your respect. Specifically to start, what should I have done when I got to this scene? What am I supposed to do?
Well, like you mentioned, scene safety is our priority when we arrive on scene, mainly for the firefighters and paramedics, and then for the victims. But as you were saying, you thought of scene safety as kind of an afterthought, but you probably thought of it pretty quick. But you, as somebody who's by themselves, don't have the luxury of, let's say, a paramedic engine where we have 4 guys. You know, the captain can concentrate on scene safety. The engineer can concentrate on traffic control. So each of us has a job that would kind of touch on each of those areas that you talked about, looking for additional victims. You know, there could be spilled fuel. There could be a problem, you know, with the battery igniting the fuel, which rarely happens, but it is something that you have to be concerned about. But we have the manpower to handle all those concerns that you were just talking about. Whereas somebody who's by themselves, you're overwhelmed. Your resources are overwhelmed, but it's natural just to go running and try and help the person who's most critical first. But again, like I said, you don't have that luxury, and we do.
So what would you do if you came to a scene like that? And there's usually a few people standing around. Do you assign people jobs and say, you know, make sure a car doesn't come and drive over the top of us and sort of act like a policeman? Would you do something like that?
Yeah. For instance, last year I came upon an accident on Highway 395 on my way up to Mammoth. I was by myself. And I thought first of scene safety. I pulled my car out of the way, made sure I was safe, made sure that anybody else who was arriving on scene was out of the highway and not going to get hit, and then made sure that the vehicle that I witnessed roll was stable and there was no additional problems such as fire or spilled fuel. It's really hard, even as a paramedic or as a doctor. You don't have your tools with you if you're by yourself, and that's extremely frustrating.
Okay, so a couple of things. Number one, we should say outright, fucking drinking and driving.
Oh my gosh.
Right? Totally nebulous, sort of blurry. Everybody knows it's bad, but it's not really that bad until you turn your car over and kill your girlfriend.
Yep.
I mean, come on.
Yep.
Right? I mean, just a good reminder for everybody out there, ourselves, everybody out there, that's why you don't drink and drive and do whatever else and drive.
So at this point, it's normal for people to want to know, well, what happened to this girl? What happened to this guy? But I have to summarize it this way. Although I might be able to, as her treating physician at the scene, be able to say, well, I am one of the doctors that look after her. There are actually rules called HIPAA that protect patients' privacy. So it's a little bit of a gray area as to whether I could go to the hospital or call the hospital and say, look, I looked after this patient on the street. I would like to know what happened to her. I think that sometimes that's a reasonable thing to do. Sometimes that might not be reasonable. The fact is, the reason that I would try and follow up would be more for the show than for anything that I could do for her ongoing care. So I decided that it was not the most professional thing to do to follow up and find out what went on. Now, in the past, I have looked after patients in the streets. I had a gentleman who had a heart attack, and I later called the hospital and I asked how he was doing. And that seemed completely appropriate, and he was doing fine. Time has passed with this situation, and I don't think it's now appropriate for me to do it because I frankly would be doing it more for the show than otherwise. The point is, it doesn't really matter to the sort of teaching or the most important aspects of this story, whether she had a significant brain injury or whether she got better or whether she died would not be the point of this story. The point of this story, of course, is that really bad things can happen. And even if she was lucky enough to not have bad things happen, it would have only been because of luck and for no other reason.
I was sitting at the edge of my seat the whole time. I could picture myself being there, and whew, that sounds like a really, really difficult situation to be in.
That's Jess Mason. You'll be hearing a lot of her. She's our other co-host. She's an ER doc in training. Well, now's a good time to do something else with the show. It's a little thing we call the story behind the story. So we've got the show, you've heard part of the show, you've sort of get the feel of how this is going to go down. But we also want to tell you about the people behind the show and how the show develops. And in that vein, in that spirit, therefore, I want to tell you about Jess. It's fascinating. You see, Jess became a doc because she got sick of the entertainment industry.
The last straw was I was actually a hand double for Minnie Driver.
Jess was a theatre major. She had no intention to go into medical school. She was going to be an actress.
Yeah, no, I thought I was going to go into theater, film, and TV.
But like so many people who start down that path, it doesn't always work out.
As I started kind of getting a little bit of work out in LA, started realizing that I wanted something a little bit different. I wanted something a little bit more science-based, something I felt like mainly that I had a regular job is mainly what I wanted.
And here's where Minnie Driver comes in.
It was in a show, it was on Fox. This was like 10 years ago, but it was on Fox. It was called The Riches, and she was kind of like a gypsy con artist, and she had to do this magic trick.
I can help you.
I got Aubrey for that.
I know what paralegal means.
But Jess thought this was pretty weird because she wasn't trained as a magician at all. But she was actually trained as
a ventriloquist.
But through people she knew when she was in ventriloquist school at the Magic Castle growing up, she got the job. And here's what happened.
One of them had been contacted to try to find a woman who could do this card trick for Minnie Driver. So they called me, which was odd because I wasn't a magician. And they said, Jess, we need someone who can do this card trick. And I was like, okay, good luck with that. And they're like, no, we want you to do it. So I said, well, I don't do card tricks. And they said, well, it's very easy. We can teach you. And I said, if it's that easy, go teach Minnie Driver. They said, we promise it's easy. You can do the trick. So sure enough, I learned how to do the trick. It wasn't that hard. I was immediately hired, and I showed up the day to film this scene for the show. And luckily, they had hired actually 2 of us for the show. They hired me and one other girl, and they were going to pick whose ever hands looked more like Minnie's. So I waited out in the hot sun all day. I'm already kind of fed up with the entertainment industry. Like, it's so hard to get a job, and you hurry up and wait. And so they come over to choose between us. And I just sort of stand in the back and play it cool. And they see the other girl, and they point to her, and they're like, are you doing the trick? And she's like, yeah. And so they're like, okay, great, come with us. So I kind of slowly back away. I was getting paid either way. And I was like, great, I'm out, I'm going home. I go home. A couple hours later, I get a phone call saying,
come back. We didn't realize that the other girl is only 17 and she doesn't have a worker's permit, so she can't legally work on the set.
I said, well, if you want me to come back, it's going to be another $200. I was done. And so they said, okay, come on back, no problem. So I drove back. And now it was like 11 p.m. It was cold. There wasn't any warm food. There wasn't anywhere comfortable to wait. And what ended up happening is they called for the scene before me, and they kept asking, Jess, are you practicing? Are you practicing? And then they called for the scene after my scene, and then the one after that. And I was like, are we going to film the scene with the card trick? And they said, oh, well, we cut that one. And that's when I was like, I hate this business. I'm out.
And she gets this crazy idea
about maybe going into medicine, and went back to college, had taken a little time off, went back to college, and really never looked back. I loved it. I realized that I actually did like science, and I was fortunate to get into medical school, into a great medical school, USC, and then From there, decided to go into emergency medicine. And now I am doing my residency training, which is the postgraduate training where you choose your specialty and you learn all about that specialty. So I'm doing that out in Cleveland, Ohio.
So if you thought the doctors were the geeky kid that sat up the back of the class and were really good at math and science and never did much interesting in their lives, Jess proves you wrong.
I did get my extra $200 though.
So that's the story of Jess. We'll be telling you about more of the players in this program as we go. But for now, I want to thank Jess. My name's Mel Herbert. It was produced by Cece Herbert. Sound design by Wendy Rodeweiss. Thanks also to Aaron Bright, and of course to you. Thanks for listening. We hope to talk to you a lot in the months and the years ahead. Mostly, you know why? Mostly because
This won't hurt a bit.
So that's it, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. That's episode 1. I hope you enjoyed it. We've got more great stuff coming. In episode 2, we're going to be talking about things that go bite. Things that can hurt you on the outside of the hospital, and some crazy bitey things that they use inside the hospital. In episode 3, we're going to talk about some neurological conditions that you can get that make things appear like you're in Alice in Wonderland. We're also going to be doing some stuff on death and dying. That one you really don't want to miss. My name's Mel Herbert. This was This Won't Hurt a Bit. Can't wait to talk to you soon. Bye for now.